All right, this is, of course, America's election headquarters here at FoxNews.com Live. So let's get straight to politics, and boy, is there some politics around right now. We have Guy Benson joining us on the panel, the political editor of the conservative website, townhall.com. He's in our D.C. bureau. And also with him in D.C. is Michael Shank, vice president at the Institute for Economics and Peace, an organization which draws parallels between how peacefulness affects economies. It's a very interesting organization you're a part of there, Michael. And before we get to that, there's a lot of economics talk in Washington right now, but precious little peace, as evidenced by President Obama and John Boehner yesterday. Let's listen to those two arguing about the payroll tax cut and whose fault it was that there is no deal.
The bipartisan compromise that was reached on Saturday is the only viable way to prevent a tax hike on January 1st. It's the only one. Even though Republicans and Democrats in the Senate were willing to compromise for the good of the country, a faction of Republicans in the House are refusing to even vote on the Senate bill.
We've done our work for the American people. Now it's up to the President and Democrats in the Senate to do their job as well. A 2-month extension is nothing more than kicking the can down the road. The President has asked us to do this for a full year. We did it for a full year.
So, Michael, according to the President and according to the Speaker, everybody's done what they need to do, but yet there's no deal. What on earth is going on? Who's at fault here?
Well, actually, I think Boehner's right in terms of kicking the can down the road, but even a year deal on the extension for payroll tax cut, unemployment insurance, and the doc fix would be kicking the can down the road. I think Congress should spend the next 3 months not fixating on essentially $1,000 in American household pockets, which is a substantial amount of money for an average household income for 90% of America that's roughly $31,000. So $1,000 means a lot, but there are 3 big issues that I wish Congress would focus on. One, the 315,000 jobs that actually left permanently the workforce. American people leaving the workforce permanently last month. We've not talked about that. We've not talked about the highest poverty rate, the highest income inequality rate in a century since World War II and the Great Depression. So, you know, if Congress would spend both the previous 2 months and the future 2 months focusing on that, that would be long-term thinking, exactly what Congress needs to focus on.
Guy, if they did this deal and gave themselves 2 months at least, as the Democrats have outlined, wouldn't that at least be something?
Well, maybe. It's just such a hot mess here in Washington this whole week, Jonathan. I have to tell you, I am leaving as soon as we're done with this segment. I'm driving home for Christmas. I cannot wait to get out of this city because I'm just disgusted with both sides of the aisle right now. I mean, yes, the Senate bill does something, which is it gives everyone a little piece of the political pie, which is what they're fixated on. There's just one little problem here, which is on Monday, the National Payroll Tax Consortium, a non-partisan, policy-neutral organization that just studies the nuts and bolts of implementing tax policy, came out and said the Senate bill is unworkable. It literally cannot be implemented, and that's almost being treated like an afterthought here by senators from both parties, and that is completely confounding to me. And that's, by the way, on the shoulders of both Harry Reid and his folks and Mitch McConnell and his folks. It's like they came up with a political solution that I was fine with on Friday without actually looking at what the policy implications are. And if we're not trying to craft policy that at least has a chance of working and being implemented, what on earth are we doing in this town?
Well, Michael, it's great that we have bipartisan agreement here that Congress is letting us all down, but isn't it a dreadfully sorry state of affairs, an awful way in which to end a year? We cannot get anything done, and presumably it's because everybody is playing politics one eye on next November.
You're absolutely right. It is a dreadful, sully state of affairs, and like Guy, I'm headed to Pennsylvania to visit my folks over the weekend, so I agree in terms of the excitement of getting out of this town. Let me just add to the political conversation, and then I want to address the pay for, which Guy talked about, because he's right on the $33 billion. It is on the backs of homeowners and mortgage lenders who will be dealing with a new fee to pay for essentially the 2-month extension. But in terms of the politics, Senator Heller, Republican senator from the state of Nevada, was supportive of this 2-month extension, actually went against Boehner, has been pretty vocal against Boehner in terms of moving this forward, and now Rep. Flake, Congressman Flake, who's running for a Senate seat in Arizona, went also against Boehner. He's one of the 7 Republicans to vote against Boehner, so it's truly political. Senator Heller is one of 4 GOP senators to face a tough race. Congressman Flake, who's running for the Senate seat, they both know that this 2-month extension appeals to the American people, and who doesn't want an extra $1,000 in their pocket at the end of 2012? But again, to my first point, it's insubstantial. The big problem that no one's addressing is the 315,000 Americans who permanently left the workforce, the highest poverty rate and the highest income inequality rate. That's what Congress should be focusing on.
So, Guy,
but in fairness, this is an issue. The payroll tax temporary holiday, it's not a real cut, it's a temporary holiday, will not be extended unless Congress acts, and that will impact employers and employees starting January the 1st.
Absolutely.
So I understand why Congress is trying to deal with it. And we're at a point, Jonathan, where we have the Senate Democrats, the Senate Republicans, the House Democrats, the House Republicans, and the White House all saying that they want to extend it, and yet it's not getting done. And I know we've been casting stones at Republicans, and I think the Republican leadership in particular dropped the ball both in their messaging and in their coordination, and they seem to have misgauged the temperature of their own caucus, especially in the House. The Democrats, meanwhile, seem gleeful that the Republicans didn't go along with this unworkable 2-month Band-Aid compromise, and they are right now steadfastly refusing to negotiate any further. And that here's another problem. In this city, and the way that bills become law, typically under normal circumstances, if the House passes a bill, then the Senate passes a different bill on the same topic, they create a conference committee and they hash out the differences, and then they send that new bill back to both houses. And what we have on the Democrat side is they're refusing to even appoint anyone to be on a potential compromise conference committee. And the Senate is refusing to come back here. So, I mean, everyone's playing games. Unfortunately, the Republicans in the House might be right on policy, but because of the way they've bungled it, they are losing the politics badly, which is unfair because the Democrats are equally responsible for this whole mess, because Republicans in the House at least passed the 1-year extension, which is what the president until yesterday said he wants.
All right,
let me just add to that.
Michael, let me just, while we're on the question of these economic issues and everything, I just want you to talk a little bit about some of the work that your organization does, because I think it's really interesting and something that people should go to your website and take a look at. The parallels you draw, I was reading this report yesterday, and I wasn't anywhere near smart enough to actually understand it, but the parallels you draw between peacefulness and the economic benefits. Now, when we talk about that, we think of countries that are at war or plagued by civil strife. But there's an application here for the U.S., you say, as well, in your research.
Absolutely. So we have a U.S. Peace Index in addition to a global peace index. The Economist Intelligence Unit provides us with all the data that we crunch and compile into these reports. If you look at the U.S. Peace Index, the states that are most peaceful are states that are investing in higher education, they're investing in insurance, they're making sure their income inequality is low, they're making sure that their teenage pregnancy rate is low, that their poverty rate is low, that their educational opportunity is high. So you start to see all these correlations in terms of social policy and levels of violence. We try to put a cost on that violence in terms of how much is it undermining economic productivity. You spend a lot of money on homicides. You spend a lot of money on violent crime. You spend a lot of money dealing with. Washington Post just did a big sting operation on gun trafficking in the U.S. Availability of arms. What does that cost to society? So yeah, we try to draw some correlations between social policy, what are states and countries investing in, and what's the output in terms of levels of violence and undermining economic productivity.
All right, there's some really interesting information there. I'd commend everybody to go and look at the Institute for Economics and Peace, which is economicsandpeace.org, Michael?
That's it, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for explaining it. And let's move on now to the race for the Republican presidential nomination. Guy, I just want you to listen to former President Bill Clinton, who was on with Bill O'Reilly last night. Fascinating conversation the two had. Bill O'Reilly asked President Clinton his thoughts on his old nemesis, Newt Gingrich. Listen to this.
You work with Newt Gingrich. You respect him?
I respect his ability to think and do, and I eventually hammered out a really productive relationship with him. I think he was way more political than I would have been. He's defended what he called scorched earth politics, and I certainly was the beneficiary of it. Let me just say this. When we were working together, I enjoyed it. And I think he has a lot of knowledge, and I think he comes up with some quite creative ideas.
Guy, I thought it was interesting that President Clinton seemed to articulate what a lot of Republicans even think about Newt Gingrich, that he's smart, comes up with creative ideas, but in the end you can tell they really don't like him very much.
Well, far be it from the Clintons to be political in any way or engage in scorched earth politics. Maybe we could chat with Paul Begala and James Carville about that, but so that was a little bit of spin. I also think I read this morning, I'm not sure if it was during the O'Reilly interview, that Bill Clinton came out and gave his Republican endorsement to John Huntsman. Always be very skeptical of the other side offering you advice in terms of whom to nominate for president. I just, I think that you're right. There is some skepticism about Newt Gingrich and his suitability to be a presidential nominee. Being a smart guy, being someone who can give good political advice from time to time, who can come up with big ideas and maybe push the policy envelope a little bit, that's a very different skill set than someone running for president in a general election from coast to coast. And I think that's a major component of what Republican voters, starting just about in 2 weeks from now in Iowa, need to very seriously think about when they're weighing their options for who's going to go up against President Obama, who everyone on my side of the general spectrum, and some people even in the center and center-left agree, he needs to be defeated in 2012.
Michael, from your point of view, as you look across the field of Republican presidential candidates, who is best placed to introduce the kind of policies that you at your organization would support?
That's a great question. So Romney being the businessman, Gingrich being the politician. Interesting, Washington Post ABC poll yesterday showing Ron Paul doing better against Obama than Gingrich. I think there was like a 2-point difference between the two of them, with Ron Paul in the lead. Romney doing better than Obama on all things economic policy. I think I just want to go back to the Clinton-Gingrich conversation, because I think Gingrich really screwed himself a bit on this whole activist judges. Even Attorney General under Bush, Michael Mukasey, saying that it's outrageous, ludicrous, he's gone too far, and now National Review saying he went too far as well. So I think Gingrich has shot himself in the foot a little bit. I think you had Romney's communications director on Fox yesterday kind of saying, we've got it in the bag, Gingrich is on the way down. But in terms of policies that would best support the Institute for Economics and Peace, I think it would have to be a bit of an amalgamation. Gingrich's work on climate change would be in line with some of the work our organization is doing. Ron Paul's views on foreign intervention would probably be in line, but some of Romney's economic policy in terms of fiscal conservatism would be in line with the Institute for Economics and Peace. So I think it'd be a bit of a mixed bag.
Guy, as a leading conservative, who
That's
would
a
you...
stretch.
All right, as whatever you are as a conservative, who do you think is best placed of that field to defeat President Obama?
Well, if you look at the polling at the moment, it appears to be, in most cases, Mitt Romney. That's not an endorsement on my part. I think that I represent a lot of center-right voters who look at the field and are somewhat dismayed by the choices that we have. I think there are a lot of up-and-coming, rising stars in the party who, for one reason or another, have decided not to run this year. But it is what it is. We have who we have. I'll support, regardless of what happens, I'll support the Republican nominee. And Jonathan, a little inside baseball here. I'm covering all these folks for the next couple months, trudging through Iowa and New Hampshire, so I'd prefer not to come out and say who I might be leaning toward or against, on Fox News Live, just strategically so I can do my job.
Fair enough, Guy. Always interesting to hear how you feel things are leaning, though. And Michael, let me come back to you. Ron Paul, would it be a disaster for the Republicans if he were to win Iowa? Nobody seems to think of him as a national front-runner in any way, shape, or form. And does it just muddy the field then if he wins Iowa?
It does muddy the field. Romney's communications director, who was on Fox yesterday, when asked about Ron Paul, kind of dismissed him as not even a threat. He was actually quite kind to him in his commentary. Shows that the Republican Party, the leadership, hasn't chosen to attack Ron Paul. If he wins Iowa, which would be unlikely, but if he does, then all sights would be pointed on Ron Paul, and then he'll get the full heat of the Republican Party. But until that happens, they don't see him as a real threat. I do want to go back to one thing in terms of the general loss of faith and why Guy is excited to leave town and why I'm excited to leave town. I mean, we've got an all-time historic low for annual average of faith in Congress. So it's been dipping to 9%, 11%, but the annual average is at 17%, which is a historic low. I know the Post-ABC poll showed yesterday that faith in Republicans in Congress is at 20%, but I'd say that's across the board. No party should be gleeful at this moment. To Guy's point about the Democrats being gleeful, I agree. It's the responsibility of both parties to come to conference and work this out. But there's low faith, which is why people are turning to the No Labels Party, the Americans Elect Party. I mean, there's real need for kind of third-party initiatives, which is where Ron Paul might be able to tap into that. Grover Norquist saying today in the Washington Post that Ron Paul has done the best among all the candidates in recruiting new candidates, in terms of recruiting new constituencies. So he's building, according to Grover Norquist, he's building the Republican Party in a way that no other candidate is doing. So there's something to be said for that.
Guy Benson, quickly on Ron Paul.
Yeah, a third party run by Ron Paul guarantees an Obama victory. And it's as simple as that. So if Ron Paul is the fighter for liberty and freedom that he claims to be, and if Barack Obama is the #1 problem, which would seem to be the case since he's trying to run against him, to hand the election to him would be wildly irresponsible. I think Ron Paul is appealing in some ways. He's consistent. He's been a fighter. He does believe in the Constitution. There are just so many pieces that we haven't even really talked about with Ron Paul just yet that make him, I think, totally disqualified to be president of the United States. I think there's a chance he wins Iowa, but he has a very low ceiling nationally. He will not be the Republican nominee. I'm not really sweating that contingency at all.
All right, Guy Benson, political editor and completely unbiased political editor of townhall.com, at least when it comes to the Republican presidential candidates. Thanks very much, Guy. Also, Michael Shank, vice president of the of the Institute for Economics and Peace. Again, I commend everybody to go take a look at that website.
Thanks,
it's fascinating material there. Thank you both. Have a great weekend with your families. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas, you guys.
All right, thanks very much. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we will be back with the queen of the Fox Business Network. Jerry Willis is in the house. Stay with us.